You are live.
Thank you.
It's the first one.
All right, good evening. Welcome. It's the City Council Workshop. Today is Monday, February 24th, 2025, and it's 5:15 p.m. Around the table, we have Councilor Mallard, Councilor Trumbull, Councilor Hawes, Councilor Fish, Councilor Dean, Councilor Cornier, Councilor Beck, and myself, Councilor Pelletier. And we are joined for the first item on our agenda, which is the city solicitor update by our city solicitor, Dave Sevchek.
Hi, Dave Sevchek, City Solicitor. I just wanted to update the council on a few of the things that the legal department has been spending a good deal of time on since the last time that we updated you. The first item on the list for me to update you on is the pending Bangor Mall land use enforcement court actions. And I don't really want this to be a back and forth about that. The matter is still pending and is awaiting the judge's decision. But I did want to just kind of just review a little bit that these are actually two cases involving about 5 different land use ordinance areas. The two that were joined in one originally from one suit were the stormwater maintenance violations, and the other one was the sewer use maintenance violations. And that all started in May when the our stormwater manager was called to the property to because there was a sinkhole that had opened up, and the stormwater manager determined that the sinkhole had opened up because of the fact that there's a 54-inch diameter stormwater pipe that the Bangor Mall owners were not maintaining, and as a result, soils were being washed away, and that results in sinkholes. And a letter was sent out in May to the Bangor Mall owners, and then there was another letter sent out in July, and nothing was done about it. And then in late August, another sinkhole opened up, and the letters that went out warned that, you know, these sinkholes could cause damage to sewer or stormwater structures. And indeed, in late August, sinkhole opened up, and it caused the breakage in the Bangor Mall's sewer pipe, as well as another stormwater pipe. They were notified, even with the property, they were notified about the situation and ordered to, you know, fix it. Their local property manager got a local contractor out who set up a temporary bypass of the sewer pipe so that it could make its way to the sewer main again, instead of the sewage from the Bangor Mall property going into the sinkhole, which, by the way, drained to this stormwater pipe. It drained the spillage of the sewage was not only going into the ground, but also into the stormwater system. And the stormwater system emptied to another property on which there were 2 detention ponds, an upper one and a lower one. The stormwater system emptied into the upper one, which then drained into the lower retention pond, which eventually drained into the Pajajawak stream. And so when they were put on notice of this, and their local property manager got a contractor out there, the contractor set up a temporary bypass, but the owners, the legal department of Namdar Realty Group, which is the group that is behind the ownership of the Bangor Mall, they told the contractor they weren't going to pay for the bypass or anything going forward, and basically directed them to disconnect the bypass, which they did. And so there are a number of violations that occurred there. The city made a decision to step in to not only reset up the temporary bypass so that the sewer pipe would not be draining into the sinkhole, but then eventually to actually fix the Bangor Mall sewer pipe and the stormwater pipe, and remediate some of the contamination that had occurred into the sewer main. And so that's what that case was all about. And the other case actually started earlier, and it involved the roof, the parking lot and driveways, and the sign out front. The roof, the owners city had been contacted by people within the mall, and went out there, and there were notices sent out in early April So it actually started earlier than the other case, about the fact that the roof was leaking inside the building. And that at that time that the sign was not being maintained and was deteriorating both in violation of our ordinance. And then in June, there was some evidence about the failure to maintain the parking lot, and they were notified in August, early August, of that situation. None of those situations were resolved despite multiple notices, and that's what the other lawsuit was about. And so there's been some talk about the amount of the damages that were sought. Our ordinances, many of them have provisions in them that if there are violations of this type or that type, then it sets the penalty range, but it also says that each day that the violation continues constitutes a separate offense. So in other words, it requires daily civil penalty. So when we commenced these actions, because the stormwater sewer one was so urgent, mainly because there was a sewer main within just a few feet, and if another sinkhole opened up, to this day, if another sinkhole opens up within a few feet of where the other sinkhole was, it could potentially damage the sewer main, and that would affect not only businesses in the mall, but businesses around the mall. And if you know, our actions were taken to protect not only the environment, but also the businesses in the mall and around the mall. And so when you hear that there were so many civil penalties requested, that was just a function of which ordinances were violated. And if many of them mandate a daily fine. So if you have a violation that goes on for a long time, that ends up in being a rather large potential civil penalty. And I wanted you to know that what we asked for, we recently filed the closing argument briefs. The judge ordered briefs in that regard. We filed one 2 weeks after the trial. The other side filed one 2 weeks after that. And then we filed a reply brief recently. And so now we're just waiting for the court's decision. But when we ask for these things, we merely ask for what the ordinance requires in terms of civil penalty. And of course, we asked that they be found in violation, that they be ordered to remediate the violations, to abate the violations and pay the civil penalties. And there's some other stuff along in there. But so I don't anticipate, but in many instances, we did not ask for the heaviest civil penalty. For some of them, we asked for a more severe civil penalty than others. For example, the failure to maintain the stormwater pipe. The time when they directed their contractor to disconnect the temporary bypass, we argued that that was an intentional violation. And so on those instances, we asked for heavier civil penalties, and some others we did not ask for the heaviest civil penalty, but because of the amount of days that it's required to be daily, they add up. And so I don't anticipate that it will take a tremendous amount of time for the court to make a decision. There's no deadline for that, but I anticipate that the court will make that decision after having a lot of evidence to digest and argument to digest, and then that will come shortly. So I didn't really want to have questions and answers about that because it remains pending. So the other thing I wanted to update you on is just before that case, and by the way, that case went to trial within 6 days of the initial court appearance. And the reason why is we had filed a motion for preliminary injunction because of the urgency of the situation with regard to the sewer main and the possibility of a new sinkhole. And so rather than deal with just the motion for preliminary injunction, the court decided to set the case for trial 6 days after the initial court appearance and just take care of all of it all at once, which was, you know, is what we couldn't ask for more than that in terms of timing. It was a lot to get ready for in 6 days, but the court was pleased with the witnesses that were on the stand from the city. So, and so was I. Just before that case happened, though, the assistant city solicitor had her first trial in the court and had a successful result in, there was a situation where there were 4 adult dogs and 6 puppies that were in a situation that was not good at all. And because they were civil matters, the DA's office doesn't handle it, so our office handled it, and she had her first trial and had a successful result. So if you see her around, you might want to congratulate her, because that's kind of a big day for a newer attorney. I also wanted to update you on the vacant building registration enforcement activity that's gone on. And I included a spreadsheet that I hope is designed in a way that kind of responded to the requests that were made the last time we were here. I will just point out that there are 31 properties that are no longer vacant since the beginning of 2024. And that means that they are either the building's been occupied, or a certificate of occupancy has been issued, or the building's been demolished. So just by coincidence, there have been 31 newly identified properties by the Code Enforcement Department. The fact that those are both 31 is mere coincidence. You'll note that there were placarded properties added to the vacant property list back in May, 36 of them. So the vacant properties on the list were 58 to start the beginning of 2024, and then went up to 90 by 2nd of June of last year. And it's been working its way down from there since then. So that's why the numbers are the way they are. There are 47 properties registered and current, and 28 properties not registered. As you know, or as you probably know, the registration and the permit, it lasts for 6 months. So if they pay the first registration fee, then 6 months later that they need to renew. And so that can then add properties to the not registered list that had been on there. Of the 28 properties that aren't registered, there are 8 properties that we have prepared complaints on and are just preparing the last few, kind of dotting the i's and crossing the t's of those files, so that we know that if once we go into court on those, that we're hoping for a successful result to try to get the court to order them to register. There's another 8 that where a letter has been sent after the notice of violation, which I kind of call the last chance letter. And then there's 5 that are in this phase of notice of violation has been sent. 7 registration renewal letter or letters have been sent. And that's where that all is the total of 28. So they're all in different phases of, and those numbers change a lot, because our team approach to the enforcement of these with the goal of reducing the number of vacant properties, I think, is working. We are getting, as you can see, there are 47 properties registered and current, and there were 14 at the beginning of 2024. So that's a big number. And like I said, there are 31 that have come off the vacant property list. But it's an ongoing thing, and it changes very quickly. And so if you had any questions about that.
Counselor Trumbull?
Yeah, just a question on the definition, because I know we're calling it abandoned property, but it's basically abandoned and dilapidated. Like if I lived in Bangor and I go to out of state for 7 months, I mean, that's not considered an abandoned property, right?
No, we call it
What's the definition of
vacant building as opposed to abandoned property.
So,
The definition is if it's vacant for 60 days,
right,
then it needs to be registered.
okay, so that
But-
would be vacant, wouldn't it?
Well, but there are exceptions for people who are seasonal and that sort of
Okay,
thing. So
and then when's the clock starts, after the 60 days is vacant, that's when the clock starts?
yes, and I'm going to get to it later. We're working on an amendment to the ordinance, which we're kind of working on the details, which I'll get to a little
Right,
later.
that tweak if somebody
To
buys
tweak
the
it.
property that's gonna rehab it.
Exactly.
That's the only issue I see
Right,
right now.
yeah.
Okay, and do we have some discretion, like these people that there's probably a couple people that bought properties. Do we have some discretion saying we're not gonna enforce it on these people because they are rehabbing their properties or?
There's discretion that the code enforcement office has, and we're, you know, exercising that discretion, but
That's all. We're just-
generally speaking, we are trying to enforce the ordinance, to require the registration and the payment of the fee with the ultimate goal of reducing the number of vacant properties, which I think we have, but we've identified more, and they weren't on the list, like the placarded properties, for whatever reason, weren't on the list, but now they are. And,
Thank you.
so,
Other questions about vacant properties? Yeah, Council Plenary.
Yeah, not a question, just comment. Thank you for, I think I was one that asked for the numbers, and seeing it like this helps me a lot. Seeing the decrease of the properties, and I know you guys are working diligently on this, and it's good to see the numbers.
yeah, it is, it's kind of important to be able to see that and better
Councilor Fish?
understand it.
When there's a vacant property due to a deceased elderly person and maybe their heirs are out of state, or maybe they don't have heirs and probate takes so long. Where do you see those properties fitting into the vacant property list?
We don't have that as an exception to the requirement to register, and I don't know that is a situation that occurs, but you know, registering the property is a way to kind of have a device that will keep it from those properties being sitting there for years and years without being addressed. So like I said, we're in the process of devising a proposed amendment to the ordinance that may have certain exceptions. I don't know if that's going to be one of them though, but we can certainly talk about that when we bring the amendment forward, or if anybody would like to talk to us about that before that time, I'd be glad to listen to suggestions. But again, I'll get to that in a little bit too.
Any other questions on this? Thank you. We're gonna-
I have a little more.
Oh,
I'll try to make it quick. Over the last several weeks, the legal department's been working with the Community and Economic Development, the Finance Department, and Code Enforcement and Treasury on taking possession of properties under the new matured tax law. Notice requirements have changed, requiring that the city notify former owners that we intend to sell the property and wait 90 days to sell the property. In order to ensure that the properties in the city's possession are sold in an efficient manner, these notices are being sent out pretty much as soon as we take possession of the tax acquired properties. The new law also requires that the city keep an itemized list of all costs associated with the property so that these costs can be reoccupied after the sale of the property. As a number of departments must collaborate to secure, notify, insure, maintain, and sell these tax acquired properties, an organized list of all costs must be kept track of, and the legal department has been the communication point to ensure that all costs associated with these properties are accounted for. And the legal department has also provided advice on notices to former owners and securing these properties after the city takes possession. I just want to let you know, that's another area that we just spent some time on since the last time I've come to update you. And the last item on the list was just the fact that we are in the process of trying to amend that vacant, devise a proposed amendment to the vacant building registration ordinance. And one of the exceptions that we were looking at was something that Councilor Tremble mentioned about a person who buys a vacant property for the purpose of fixing it up and making it so it's not vacant. The latest idea on that is like a deferred responsibility to register and pay the fee. And that's kind of a little bit in contrast to a grace period. And the reason why the latest idea has been a deferral is that if you just provide a grace period and then they don't picks it up and they just sell it again, then it's still vacant. And so the idea would be to provide a period of time whereby they would still be responsible for registering it, but registering and pay the fee would be deferred for a period of time with the idea that if it's fixed up and a certificate of occupancy is given within that period of time, then they won't have to make the payment. But if they just sell it to somebody, then and we're still trying to work out the language, then perhaps they would then still be responsible for the registration that they didn't have to pay because of the deferral, or, yeah. And there are a few other exceptions that we're trying to put some language in there, like having to do with fires and other disaster type incidents.
Counselor Trumbull?
Not about the change, but on the basic ordinance, if somebody, I can't remember what I know they go up every year, but if somebody owes $2,500 to the city for the registration, can we lien that amount, or is they just a voluntary thing, or?
If we
Any
can't
enforcement?
lien that amount right now, but we can go into court, get a judgment and an order for them to
So a civil
register it.
penalty.
And if they don't pay the judgment, once you have a judgment, you can put a judgment lien on the
Okay.
property, which is not the same thing as a real estate tax
Right.
lien. It doesn't automatically foreclose,
Okay.
but it is still a judgment lien that would sit on the real estate in
So
case
that's
it
at
gets sold.
closing, you can't collect, right? Can you get it at closing?
Well, if they try to sell the
Right,
property,
that's what I'm
we'd be
saying, yeah.
entitled
Right,
to
okay.
get paid
Yeah.
with a lien, with that kind of a lien.
Mhm.
But you can't, but a tax lien
yeah,
automatically forecloses and you
exactly,
can acquire possession of the property, and a judgment lien doesn't do that. So any other questions?
All right, thank you very
Thanks.
much, appreciate it. Next up, we will move on to the legislative update. We are joined by our city manager, Deb Laurie.
Yes, good evening. So I did put a packet, so a memo with the upcoming schedule for this week in the weekly packet. There's a number of hearings going on this week. In the memo, I outlined that I reached out to the superintendent on 3 particular education-related bills. One of them is being funding of special education, which I know the council and the school committee have talked about on a number of occasions, so I'm waiting to hear back. My assumption is that if these are items that are important to this Bangor School Department, that the council would like to submit testimony in support of their position. Okay. We submitted testimony earlier today on LD 210. LD 210 is the upcoming biennial budget. You may recall that I think earlier in January, you all had authorized the Public Health Department for submitting testimony in opposition to limiting general assistance to 3-month period in a 12-month year. That was part of the initial supplemental budget. That was stripped out of the supplemental budget. However, it was sort of referred back to the biennial budget because the biennial budget assumed that the supplemental was adopted as presented. So we did go ahead and submit that testimony again today. Later this week, there is a public hearing to convene a stakeholders group to take a look at the current state subdivision statutes. Those statutes have not been touched for decades. It is likely that they do need some updating. The concern for us is that there is not enough municipal and developer representation on them. So that would be part of our position, unless anybody has any concerns about that. I saw a bunch of head noddings, yes and no, guesses, so I'm going with that. Later on that same day, there's going to be a public hearing to expand types of revenues that are included in the revenue sharing pool. We've talked about revenue sharing quite a bit, but just by way of background, revenue sharing is the means by which the state of Maine provides a portion of the broad-based taxes it collects back to all of municipalities to fund what it costs to run a local government. It's generally limited to, the big ones are income tax, corporate taxes, and things, and sales taxes. And what this bill would do was to bring in meals and lodging tax as well. I would say that the expansion of the pool that goes back to pay municipalities to provide the services is something the council would support. On the flip side, I would say that that testimony would be in a way that it cannot come out of another bucket that they are, because clearly the state budget assumes they're gonna generate that level of meals and lodging tax, and they've got it dedicated for some other purpose. So does that, I saw yeses as well. I do, as I understand it, I believe tomorrow is the day that the legislature is going to vote on the supplemental budget. I think they are going to try to get that finally in place. I think the timing of that is interesting. I don't know that they are going to have the 2/3 majority to enact that on an emergency basis, which means if it's not enacted on an emergency basis, which goes into effect in essence immediately, they need to enact it in such a way with a simple majority that goes into effect 90 days later. So they will be, my understanding is having some of those conversations. So I don't know where all of that ends. I didn't know there are a number of other bills in here. Many of them now you're going to start seeing work sessions for. I wasn't sure if there were any other items that had come. We've kept track of ones that have been previously brought up. I think the last one was LD 487 was related to rail from Councilor Leonard. That hasn't been scheduled yet. But our plan is where possible is we'll do this weekly schedule with you. And on the off weeks of council, we'll try to work them into the committee agendas so that you always have an opportunity. I believe later this week, the Legislative Policy Committee is reconvening again. So I'm guessing there's going to be a whole host of bills coming out of that as well. While I was sitting here reading, it may not creep up on folks, but I did notice later this week, there's a bill LD 445, which is an act to stimulate housing production by increasing the threshold for participation in the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code. Currently, it's referred to, the acronym they use for that is MUBEC. Currently, MUBEC applies and must be utilized in any community with 4,000 residents or more. And what this bill would do would limit it to only communities with 10,000 or more. That feels like if it's appropriate to follow certain standards for building codes, it feels like that those standards should be pretty uniformly applied. I can tell you that our own struggle at the moment, and I know that there are people who are going to cringe, is, there are a lot of provisions of MUBEC that are expensive. And we recognize that. So where's the balance? We need to ensure the safety of residents and commercial property owners. So I'd like to do a little bit more digging on that and get back to you, but.
Deb, what I think that my concern is more not the size of the town, but the size of right, it's on existing properties, right, when you do a renovation. What kicks in? Is it 50% of investment of the value of the property? What kicks in?
You've gone down a bunny hole I'm not
Okay.
familiar with, which is
I mean,
why
I
I
think
say
they
I
might
need to
want-
go.
It might make
a little
more
bit
sense if they
further.
Look at tweaking that.
Okay. I just happened to be sitting here and I just went, I should go look and see what that does. Were there any other?
Wausau Boldashie's bill LD 237 came up again. Is that one a work session? That's on for taxation on the 27th.
Let me get to that one. LD. Yes, that's a work session.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is LD 237 was an act to increase the funds distributed to municipalities through revenue sharing. Currently it's 5%. This bill would looks to move it to 5.5% January 1 of 2026. And then I believe a year later to 6%. And if you've never listened into the work sessions, it's really, I find it kind of interesting to listen in. All right, Deb. Ready for manager updates?
I think we are.
Okay. So speaking of the Legislative Policy Committee, so this is, a committee comprised of, communities who are part of the Maine Municipal Association. The city of Bangor actually appoints a member, to this committee, and their term does not expire until we appoint a new member. The LPC is comprised of elected and appointed officials only from across the state. It's really to define the municipal interest and to maximize those interests through our participation in the legislative session. Usually the meetings are on Thursday. They typically run from about 10, I think this Thursday's is 10 to 4. So the committees are also held in hybrid, so people can zoom in if they need to. Last summer, Council Chair Pelletier was appointed to the role. Since that appointment, the city has now joined the Mayor's Coalition, which has created a schedule conflict for Council Chair Pelletier. So I'm going to be reaching out to you all via email to see if you have the interest or opportunity in participating in the LPC.
Who can be on besides elected?
Elected and appointed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said we get, well, I thought each Senate district got 2.
So each Senate district gets 2. So we're in district. I'm not gonna go, and I apologize, Senator Baldacci, I'm not gonna come to the district. But because that district is made up of Bangor and Herman, Bangor gets to appoint one automatically, and then the second one is voted on, and there were no nominees in this last round, so you all appointed me,
Okay,
or,
yeah.
yeah, so I was the second one by default. I hope you saw that, the Municipal Waste Solutions will be accepting small amounts of waste in the coming weeks as it ramps up to its full operation by the end of the year. Equipment has begun arriving on site with more on the way. There was a tour of the site last week, and we were able to tour the facility and see and hear about the upcoming upgrades to the plant. The one upgrade that I think most of us, at least I was fascinated by, other than just the whole, curious nature of what the facility is going to be doing as it sorts and converts and recycles items, is they have recently installed a fire rover system. So this is a system that continuously monitors waste piles on the processing floor for potential fire threats. It uses high definition thermal imaging and AI assisted detection. If a fire risk is identified, the system enables a remote operator to assess the situation in real time, and it actually deploys targeted suppression measures. So that was pretty, especially as we think of what happened at PERC and what you see happening on waste plants and the changes in waste related to lithium batteries and the fire risks. I thought that was they had just gotten most of it in and they're just waiting for the IT connection. So it's pretty cool. It almost is a video game. They've got the cameras, it's got heat sensors, and they've got these, spigots that they can force very and direct to the source of any potential fire. So I thought that was really kind of an interesting, I didn't know, Council Fournier, I know you went, I didn't know if you were just kind of impressed by all of the upgrades that are coming in the various ways we're gonna be able to sort waste.
The amount of money that the owners are putting into the property or the facility is quite a bit. So it just tells me they're in.
The Downtown Partnership wants to apply for a Partners for Place grant in the amount of $150,000 to fund redevelopment of the area under and adjacent to the Union Street overpass, which to me means nothing, but if you think about it from the bridge that goes from Carolinas to Sea Dog and how it's kind of dark and very industrial looking in there, and it actually chops up the sidewalk. And if you think about the flow of our pedestrian traffic, especially spring, summer, and fall, breaking up the natural flow from the waterfront to downtown and back, it could use some sprucing up. So they'd like to apply for that grant. In order to apply, they need a community partner and a municipal partner. The community partner, Wabanaki Public Health has stepped forward as the community partner, and they'd like the city to step forward as the municipal partner. Most of our role would be in the form of in-kind services because we have Parks and Rec staff, engineering staff, public works staff involved in the conceptual design and some of the execution. So It would be, basically our donation would be in kind. There may be some small items that we may buy out of existing budgets, but it's something we would buy anyway. Unless there's any objection, I'd like to go ahead and have that grant application is due the end of the week, so,
Question.
yes.
The work that we've been doing with the Department of Transportation, did
Yes.
that reflect down in that area also?
It does not go all the way
Okay.
down that way.
So we're not doing it
We're not
twice.
doubling up. Nope. My only last thing is just a reminder. Tonight is the first council meeting where we'll be following the recently adopted public comment policy. The most noticeable change obviously is during the general comment period up front, not on agenda items. That doesn't change. Is that we're gonna limit the period at the beginning of the meeting to 15 minutes so that we can take care of this, conduct our city business out of courtesy to those attending for specific agenda items. And at the end of the meeting, at the council chair's discretion, public comment period can be reopened for about 45 minutes. So just a reminder, we have posted that to the website, we've posted social media, and I've given you a little reminder.
Thank you.
So, and that's all I had.
There was one more thing. So, there are three of us who are going to the National League of Cities convention. On Wednesday, we have a Hill Day where we'll be able to meet with our elected officials. On, Wednesday of this week, the Maine Municipal Association is holding a meeting to get input and feedback on additional issues that we might want to bring forward to those elected officials when we're there. So they have they always prepare a state of Maine municipal issues paper that we bring and talk about those issues. But if there are additional things that the council would like to bring forward, please let us know, and I'll be happy to take those to that meeting on Wednesday afternoon.
I was looking for the. And a lot of it was focused on OSHA requirements regarding fire brigades, for example, that were really gonna negatively impact a lot of communities in Maine. Who have volunteer fire departments, our concerns about our border communities and our border relations, especially with as much development and cross-border. I mean, we all have friends in we don't really see the borders here in Maine. I think the other area of emphasis was ensuring that entitlement and grant funds, recognizing that, there may be a need to relook at those funds, but providing us and keeping us abreast of those things so that we have an opportunity to kind of create a soft landing if some funding is going away versus the fact that if funding goes away immediately and you're partway through a project and you can't finish it. So there could be grants out there that are roads or building construction, that if the funding gets pulled, now communities are left with contractual. So, and looking at ways to help, offering suggestions as to how to help streamline some of the federal communications. We often find it difficult to get answers on grants or on particular applications that we've submitted. We are looking to do the right thing, but sometimes we need assistance to kind of navigate the dearth of regulations that are out there, and really trying to consolidate, some of the federal systems. So those were some of I think those were the major topics in that.
Yeah, good recall.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the city manager? All right, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I move we go into executive session, 1 MRSA, section 4056P, labor relations. Want to do the other one too?
Yes.
And executive session 1 MRSA, section 4056E, consultations with city solicitor.
Second,
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We need a roll call vote. Counselor Mallard,
Yes.
Counselor Trumbull.
Yes.
Counselor Hogg.
Yes.
Counselor Fish.
Yes.
Counselor Dean.
Yes.
Counselor Tonya.
yes.
Counselor Beck.
Yes.
I'm a yes, it's unanimous. We're in executive session. Are we,